Okay, hi everybody. We're RAMBAN on Koheles Part 2, and we're continuing where we left off from last week. We had spent a lot of time on identifying the man named Koheles, who is the author of this book. It's one of these books of Tanakh where the book itself is named after the author. Ani Koheles ben David. I am Koheles, the son of King David, right? So we had pointed out that he is identified traditionally by Chazal as Shlomo HaMelech, as King Solomon. The Ramban had pointed out that it can be no one else other than Shlomo, because if he identifies himself as the son of David who was a ruler in Jerusalem, there was no one else who was the son of David who was a ruler in Jerusalem. There's an interesting medrash in Shir HaShirim Rabbah which states as follows: Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shlomo Chachma Sha'alta Lach. There's an episode at the beginning of the book of Kings where Hashem appears to Shlomo prophetically in a dream and asks him, Shlomo, you are righteous and you can therefore ask me for anything that you like. And Shlomo responds to Hashem, there's only one thing I want, Hashem. I want wisdom. I want Chochmah. So the Medrash elaborates on the gift that Hashem promises to Shlomo. And Hashem says to him, Shlomo, you've requested wisdom. V'lo sha'alta osher u'nechasim. You didn't ask me for wealth. You didn't ask me for v'nefesh oivecha, to defeat your enemy. So chayecha ha'chochma ve'hamada natun lach. Ve'al yedei kein osher u'nechasim etein lach. So I promise to you, Shlomo, that I will give you great wisdom. And through that great wisdom, you'll have the ability to acquire great wealth. If only it were that simple, right? But truly, a person who has great wisdom, that is the key. That is the key to all different kinds of blessings in life. So miyad, and then the pasuk says, Vayiket Shlomo v'hinei chalom, that Shlomo awoke and behold it was a dream. So on this pasuk, the Medrash continues and it says, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak chalom haya omeid al kano, that the dream came true. And as soon as Shlomo awoke, he realized that he had within him a newfound wisdom, a newfound understanding that he never had before. And the Medrash elaborates, and it says, Chamor nohek v'hu yodea ma nohek. He heard a donkey braying outside, and he immediately understood what the donkey was saying. Sipor mitzutzei v'hu haya yodea ma mitzutzei. A bird was chirping outside. And as he heard the bird, he knew immediately what the bird was communicating. So he realizes that he's woken up now with this great wisdom. Miyad vayavo Yerushalayim vayamod lifnei Aron beris Hashem. It was at that moment that the pasuk, going back to the book of Malachim, says that he comes to Jerusalem after waking up. He offers sacrifices to Hashem. Vayas mishtel l'chol avadav, and he makes a big party for all of his household. And Amar Rabbi Elazar says, Mikan, Sha'osim Su'uda L'Gomra Shel Torah. We learn from here that any time a person has completed a series of study whereby he's acquired wisdom, he should make a party. What's the reason for making a siyum? Not because Baruch Hashem I've completed a Maseches, but because Baruch Hashem I've acquired a unit of wisdom that I did not previously possess. That's the cause for celebration according to the Medrash. Amar Rav Yudin lamedcha shekol mi shemalamed Torah berabim zocheh sheshar lav ruach hakodesh. And finally the Medrash says that if anyone teaches Torah publicly, like we learned about last week, he will merit to have the divine spirit rest upon him. And that is why Shlomo made a point of teaching Torah publicly, which allowed him to have ruach hakodesh, and immediately he was able to compose the three great works, Mishlei, Koheles, and Shir HaShirim. So this Medrash just reinforces all the things that we were saying last week about identifying Koheles as Melech Shlomo. But the Ramban, in the course of his drasha, emphasizes this idea that the purpose of Koheles is to rejoice. That you see that Shlomo writes Koheles in a state of great joy, even though there's a certain nihilistic tone of misery and of purposelessness throughout Koheles, but he says, no, don't misunderstand that theme. The real theme of Koheles is the joy of acquiring wisdom and understanding and seeing the bigger picture. But he also points out that anytime you see other places in Tanakh where a party, a feast is made, many times it's also to celebrate the acquisition of a newfound wisdom. And so he therefore says, and this is, by the way, consistent with his Torah commentary, that he would write only a few years hence, because the Ramban wrote his Torah commentary after he made Aliyah, in the last few years of his life, and he's giving this drasha as he's leaving Spain to depart and eventually make his way to Eretz Yisrael. So he's an old man, he's acquired a lot of wisdom, and he's departing from his chevra, and he now talks about, strangely enough, the importance of making a feast and a party and rejoicing when you finish a unit of study. So it really doesn't have anything directly to do with Koheles. It's very tangential. But he says, and I'll get to that in just a minute, he says we see a similar episode of rejoicing over acquiring wisdom at the time of Kabbalah Satorah. In Parshas Mishpatim, in a few weeks from now, we're going to be reading about Maimon Har Sinai, when the Jewish people say Naaseh v'Nishma. And there are certain individuals who are given the special privilege of being able to not stand away from the mountain, but actually to come closer to the mountain. These are Aharon, his sons Elazar and Itamar, Nadav and Avihu. They are the Shivim Zakenim, the 70 elders. These people are standing up close. And it says, Vayechezu es ha'elokim vayochalu vayishtu. It says that they gazed upon Hashem. In other words, when they say they gazed upon Hashem, it means that they were able to apprehend a certain image of God that gave them great understanding of who Hashem is. And then it says, Vayochlu vayishtu, they ate and they drank. Now there's a dispute among the commentaries, and in the Medrash itself there's a dispute, as to whether eating and drinking at Har Sinai is an appropriate behavior. Would you go ahead, after viewing God and getting this newfound wisdom and understanding of the essence of God, would that cause you to start eating and drinking? This causes the RAMBAN, Maimonides, to say that what they did was an aveira. They gazed at Hashem in sort of like in a hungry, ravenous fashion, and they related it to the physical world, and they made a party. This was inappropriate, the Rambam says. And that's why eventually Nadav and Avihu and other of the elders of the Jewish people were eventually killed in the desert because of their inappropriate, irreverent kind of attitude towards having this very intimate experience with Hashem. But the Ramban says just the opposite. You see that when a person acquires this very intimate knowledge of Hashem and acquires this newfound wisdom, that's a cause for celebration. So what these elders were doing in Maimon Har Sinai was very appropriate. And he echoes this in his Torah commentary as well in Parshas Mishpatim. And we find that David HaMelech does the same thing. After the Jewish people have completed their donations to the construction of the Beis HaMikdash shortly before his death, there too it says in Divrei Hayomim, in chapter 29, it says, Vayochlu vayishtu lifnei Hashem bayom hahu, b'simcha gedolah. They had completed a certain kind of certain chapter of being able to reach a certain spiritual level, of having amassed all that was needed to construct the Beis HaMikdash. That too was a cause for celebration. So this is really, the Ramban spends a few paragraphs on this whole idea of rejoicing when you come to the end of a certain era or a certain chapter in a person's life, when you've accomplished a certain spiritual accomplishment. And I'm reading this, and I'm thinking to myself, what in the world does this have to do with Koheles? And then I recall that this is the last drasha, or one of the last drashas, that the Ramban is giving to the Jews of Catalonia before departing them. And you can only imagine to yourself that the mood in that room, if we were a fly on the wall, if we were a parishioner in the shul in Girona, in Catalonia, northeastern Spain, all the way back in the year 1270-something, as the Ramban is preparing to go on his journey to Eretz Yisrael. He's been the Mored Asra of the Kehila for probably about 30, 40 years, and he's now departing under a cloud because the government is forcing him to leave under the threat of execution. So he's got to leave. And it must be a very, very heartbreaking experience for the community, for the Ramban. And the Ramban has to give them some kind of chizuk, and he tells them, this is not a time for sadness. This is a time of celebration because we've reached a certain end of a chapter, and it's now just like you reach a certain end of a chapter and you've acquired great wisdom like Shlomo HaMelech has done. That's a time for celebration. So let's rejoice over all that we've accomplished, and let's go weiter. Let's move on to the next plateau. Now, Chazal also state, there's another medrash, and when we talk about the 3 books that Shlomo HaMelech composed, he writes, as I mentioned to you, he writes Koheles, Shir HaShirim, and Mishlei. So there's another medrash, and this is in Shir HaShirim Rabbah as well, that says that Shlomo HaMelech wrote these 3 books at 3 different stages of his life. He wrote Shir HaShirim when he was a young man, when he's filled with poetry and the song of life, right? That's what a young man does. He's romantic, right? And then, as a mature adult, he writes the book of Mishlei because he's acquired a great intellectual curiosity and wisdom. And then towards the end of his life, as he becomes an older man, and he becomes nihilistic and realizes what's the purpose of anything that we do, because all we are is dust in the wind, and we're going back from whence we came, and he's thinking about death and what he's accomplished in his life. That's when he writes Sefer Koheles. The Midrash also observes the appropriateness of Shlomo writing Koheles because he had experienced all the worldly pleasures in the world. So these I'm just echoing to you all the midrashim that the Ramban feels all point to Shlomo as the author. And so this is another midrash that says that think about what kind of person you have to be in order to write the words Havel Havalim, in order to write that the whole world of vanity is vanity of vanities. So the Medrash, and this is Medrash in Koheles Rabbah, that says, Ilu acher omar havel aval havalim omar Koheles. If another person, other than Shlomo, would have said that the whole world is vanity of vanities, Hayisi omer zeshelo kanalo beis prutos miyamav, hu peres b'mamono shalolam. I might have argued, well, of course it's easy for a poor man who couldn't rub 2 pennies together to say that everything is vanity of vanities, because he has no experience and he has no appreciation for all of the wealth that one can acquire in the world. And therefore, Va'omer Havel Havalim, and that's why he can say it's all vanity of vanities. However, Ella, Zesh Shlomo Shekasuv Bo, but we're talking about King Solomon, and it says about King Solomon that during the height of his reign, the Pasuk says, Va'itein HaMelech es HaKesef b'Yerushalayim ka'avanim, that silver flowed through Jerusalem like stones, like the rocks and the pebbles in the street. V'lo hayu nignovos, and you couldn't even steal a bar of silver if you wanted to, because shahayu avnei eser amos va'avnei shmona amos, because the bars of silver were huge. You couldn't pick them up. There were 2 types of silver bars. One was 10 amos long and one was 8 amos long. An amma is at least 1.5 feet. So imagine how huge these silver bars were. And the weight, the scales that existed in Shlomo Melech's time were made out of gold. And therefore the pasuk says, Ein kesef lo nechshav b'mei Shlomo l'me'uma, that silver was considered to be nothing in the times of Shlomo HaMelech. And lazeh na'el omar havel havalim. Such a person can truly say havel havalim and really know what he's talking about and really mean it. He's acquired all the pleasures of the world. He's experienced life. He's had 1,000 wives. He's had all the opulence that one human being can possibly have. And for him to say it means nothing, then you really know it really means nothing. So now let's continue along in the text of Sefer Koheles. There's an inherent question that I touched on last week that one can immediately ask when looking at the nihilistic, the sense of there's no purpose, there's no meaning to life. When we talk about there's no value to the world, it's all vanity, it's all nothingness. That's Shlomo's central theme. So the question is, how can Shlomo be so nihilistic and thereby cast aspersions on the world that Hashem created? It's akin to the story in the Gemara. The Gemara states in Maseches Tainis that there was once a great sage known as Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Shimon. But he did something at a time in his life when he was feeling somewhat proud of himself, somewhat feeling good about himself. And one day he was walking and he met a particularly ugly man. And he said to him, Kama muchur oso ha'ish. He says, boy, "You're ugly." That's what he says to the fellow. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing this. This is not a very nice thing to do. And so Chazal say and then he was ridiculing. He says, "Shema b'kol b'nei recha mechoren kamoscha." Is your ugliness due to the fact that everyone where you come from is that ugly? And so what does the fellow tell him? Amar lo, eini yodeya elalech ve'omar le'uman she'asa'ani kama mechor klizeh she'asisa. He says, you know what, says this ugly man who was quite wise. He says, I don't know, and I can't tell you why I'm ugly, but maybe you could go and speak to the artisan who fashioned this vessel and ask him why he made such an ugly vessel. And the Gemara says that immediately Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon understood that what he had done was a terrible crime. And he spent the next few weeks begging for mechila, walking through the streets, following this ugly man wherever he went, asking him for forgiveness. So you see that this is a terrible thing to do, to challenge Hashem and say, it's an ugly world. It's a purposeless world. It's a vain world. It's a world that's filled with nothingness. How could Shlomo HaMelech have done such a thing and made such a bold statement? Now, especially this is problematic in light of the fact that there are many psukim in Tanakh where HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes pride in the world that He has created. And we know that it says, after Hashem created everything, Vayar Elokim es kol asher asa v'hinei tov me'od. God saw everything that He made, and behold, it was very good. And so even though you might want to argue that Shlomo is only being critical of those things that are tachas hashamayim, that are beneath the earth, beneath the skies, as he says in Pasuk Yud Gimel in the first chapter, but still, Hashem is looking at the entire world that He created, and behold, it is very good. And besides, even if the Pasuk didn't say that, you can't criticize even a component of Hashem's world, because everything that Hashem creates is for the good. So the Ramban says this is the big question of Sefer Koheles. And the answer that we can give for this question is that there are two components. And this is, of course, the Ramban giving a unique answer. He says that there are two components to this world. The Ramban uses two philosophical words that are known as Chomer and Surah, which are commonly translated as matter and form, respectively. However, the Ramban uses them in a unique fashion that is quite different from the way that we would expect the Rambam to use them. And just in order to, I won't delve into this too deeply, but we just need to understand it in a cursory fashion to understand where the Ramban is coming from. The terms matter and form are Aristotelian terms, and they refer to a certain conception that Aristotle had about how everything in this world is made up. Everything in this world has elemental essence to it, which means that there are four basic elements that are known to the Greeks and to the medieval world. They are earth, wind, fire, and water. And when you combine those base elements, which is known as the chomer, with the matter, and you mix them with form, which is tsura, which is the thought that goes into the construction of a particular item, so then you have a combination of two things, matter and form, chomer and surah, and this is how all constructs in our physical universe come into existence. So the Ramban modifies that slightly, and he says that yes, it's true, there's chomer and surah. Now from the Maimonidean point of view, and the Maharal follows the Maimonidean conception of form and matter, then the idea of surah, the idea of form as being something that is less than desirable, is not consistent with anything that the Rambam or the Maharal says. The Rambam and the Maharal view matter as being something that is distractive from spirituality, and form as being the spiritual essence of the thing. So therefore, even a human being is made of chomer and surah. The physical body is the chomer, is the matter, and our souls are the surah, our souls are the form that goes into the body. But the Ramban views it just the opposite. And he says that there are certain universal essences to our world, to our physical world. That's matter. Form is what Hashem temporarily embeds in all constructs within this world. That's what he calls tsura. It's the temporary nature of all of the complex items that are created in this world, and they don't last. So whereas the constructs of this world are purely temporary and fleeting, there are certain universals that exist in this physical world, such as earth, wind, fire, and water, the basic elements of this world, that are permanent. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu's world is such that when he first brought the world into being, he brought into being a world that was malleable and ready to be molded. And that molding process is what Shlomo HaMelech calls Havel Havalim. He says that the world that is formed over the course of time, over the 6 days of creation, is a world that is temporary and fleeting, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows that. But the permanence of the world, there's a certain permanence to the world, there's a certain universality to the world, there's a certain kind of essence to the world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says it's very good because it is meant to be permanent, it is meant to be standing, and it is something that I want to exist on a long-term basis. Those are the four base elements that are constantly changing in their constructive form, in their tzura. That's the way the Ramban is able to reconcile how Hashem can say it's a beautiful, wonderful world, whereas Shlomo can say that no, it's a world that is filled with vanity and nothingness and it's fleeting, and a person shouldn't spend so much time on the things that are only temporary. He also points out that the word tzura, which is the form, is the way we describe Hashem. We call him Hatzur Tamim Pa'alo. We call God the Tzur. The Tzur normally is translated is like Mo's Tzur, right? Rock of ages, right? The Tzur, God is the rock. But the word Tzur also comes from the word Tzura because God is the Tzayar. He is the one who implants or places form within all of the different elements in the world to give temporary construct nature to all the things that exist. And that's why when we say Tzadok Hadin, when we accept upon ourselves, in cases, Rahman al-Islam, of great tragedy, we say a prayer called Tzadok Hadin, where we accept God's judgment upon ourselves, and we say the words Hatzor Tamim Pa'alo, that God's acts are pure. We acknowledge that all that takes place in this world is fleeting in nature, and that's supposed to provide us with a sense of comfort, because life comes into the world, life goes out of the world, form and structure come into the world, form and structure leave the world, and the only thing that is everlasting are those things that are otherworldly, that are not part of the fleeting constructs of this world. And that's why, says the Ramban, Shlomo HaMelech uses the word Hevel to describe the vanity of this world. Because what is Hevel? The word Hevel in Hebrew not only means vanity or nothingness, but it also means breath. It is that which when you exhale, the air that comes out of your mouth is known as Hevel. It's breath that you exhale. And what is the imagery of breath that you exhale? It is the idea that you exhale air, it very, very quickly dissipates into the air and becomes nothingness because it has no substance, it has no permanence to it. It quickly dissipates and it's gone before you know it. And therefore the Ramban says that when Shlomo HaMelech states, Havel Havalim, as we find in the very second pasuk of Koheles, Havel Havalim, it's not a statement of fact, but rather the word Havel is also B'lashon Tzivoy. It's a commandment. Havel Havalim. It's like he's telling us, you must make vanities vain. Our job in this world is to correctly categorize the things in this world which are important and which have permanence, and the things in the world which don't have permanence and are fleeting. And once we can get that straight in our own minds, we will have fulfilled the directive of Sefer Koheles. So now at this point, Shlomo describes the various components of creation, and that's what he spends the first chapter upon. And therefore the opening, he wants to demonstrate the Hevel nature of the various different constructs of this world. And so his opening teaching is, after he has said that everything is vanity of vanities, we look into Pasuk Gimel and he says, Ma yisran la'adam b'chol amalo sheya'amol tachas hashamesh. What advantage is there to a human being in all of the work that he toils for under the sun? No matter how hard you work, on providing permanence in the things that you do in life, because there is a certain aspect to man. Mankind wishes to find stability. A lot of the things that we do in life, we buy houses, we plant gardens, we invest in things in life, we're all hoping to find permanence, a sense of security in life. And what Shlomo Melech is telling us is that nothing in this world, no matter how hard you work, it will eventually dissipate like the breath that you exhale from your mouth. He then explains how, by contrast, the universals of the world, those things which we talked about are the chomer, the base elements of the world, those will last forever. So earth, wind, fire, and water will last forever, but their constituent constructs, the things that are made of earth, wind, fire, and water, those will eventually dissipate and disintegrate. So therefore he starts by saying, Dor holech in Pasuk Dalet. He says, Dor holech v'dor ba. A generation comes and a generation goes. But I didn't translate it right. What's the correct translation? A generation goes and a generation comes. The haaretz, but the earth, le'olam omadis, but the earth, which is the base element of earth, that stays forever. So you see, he acknowledges that there is a permanence to this world, but it's the base universal elements of the world that last forever, even though the individual components of this world, one generation to the next of humanity, and all that consists and all that exists within humanity and within the world, does not last forever. So Ramban explains that the reason why Shlomo starts with the element of the earth first is that, number one, it's the most common element of all things that are physical. It's the thing that is the most visual and the most visible to man. And also he wants to remind us of the pasuk that Hashem said to Adam, Ki afar ata ve'el afar tashuv. You are but earth, and to earth you shall return. So that's why he starts off with talking about the land, the earth, the haaretz le'olam hamodes. The earth will last forever, and therefore man lasts forever, not in his individuated constituent form, but rather as being part of a larger whole of you are earth, and to earth you shall return. Now, the Ramban also points out that there's a mystical secret contained within this pasuk. Many of you may know that the Ramban was really at the cusp of the Kabbalistic world. He is living in the 13th century when the study of Kabbalah is only starting to emerge in its nascent state. The Ramban did not have his Zohar, but he had other Kabbalistic texts that were coming to the fore. He had Sefer HaBahir, he had Sefer HaYetzirah, the book of creation, the book of the Bahir, which are earlier Kabbalistic works. And the Ramban, quoting from Sefer HaBahir, says that what is being alluded to in this pasuk of Dor Holech, the Dor Ba, is, what do you think it's referring to in Kabbalah? It's referring to the secret of Gilgul Neshamot, of reincarnation, exactly. The reason why it doesn't say the generation comes and a generation goes is because a generation first leaves this world when people die, and then eventually the Dor Ba, that very same generation, comes back again at some point later through some reincarnation process. It's called Gilgul Neshamas. And he says that that is alluded to in the words Dor Holech v'Dor Ba. He says, you know what the word Dor means? It means generation. You know what word is very similar to the word Dor? Kadur. What is a Kadur? A Kadur is a ball. A ball rolls, a ball is circular, a ball is spherical. And the ball, just like a generation, represents that which comes out of the world and comes back in like a rolling ball. And that's, of course, why at a Sudas Havra'ah, at the first meal for the mourner, we give the mourner an egg, because that's supposed to remind a person that life is a galgal hachozer, that life is a constantly spinning wheel, and that there is a cycle, and there is a circle, and there is a constant movement. And therefore, what happens today, there will be a cyclical pattern to life, and there will eventually be a return to life, even though there has been death at this point. And then once Shlomo has finished with the element of earth, he then goes on to a discussion of the next element. What's the next element? Take a look at Pasuk Hey. Pasuk Hey, B'zarach HaShemesh Uva HaShemesh. The sun rises and the sun sets. Ve'el Mekamo Sho'ef Zoreach Husham. It's always going back to its normal station. That's where it goes to shine. And that's the element of what? That's the element of fire. And that's the next element that Shlomo Melech wants to discuss, because fire is something that, again, is very, very visible to man, because it's right overhead. And of course, what he's trying to point out is that no matter how much we see the sun in motion and doing something new, going to a new place, the sun always goes back to its old place and starts all over again. So no matter how new and no matter how something may appear to be changing, nothing really changes. Everything goes back to its original form. That's really what Koheles is all about. Is that don't think that something new and exciting and a change has happened. Everything that is happening now has happened before, and everything that appears to be new and changed from the past will eventually go back to its original state. And so that's why we look at the next element in Pasuk Vav, Holech el darom v'sovev el safon, sovev holech haruach ve'el saviv osav shav haruach. Here he talks about the third element, which is the element of what? Of air. And he says the winds that blow throughout the world, they start in the north and they blow to the south, but then the currents change, the wind currents change, and the wind starts blowing back from the south back to the north again. So that nothing is new, everything goes back to its original state. And then finally he mentions the element of water, and this is in Pasuk Zayin, Kol hanechalim holchim el hayam, all rivers or all brooks eventually flow out to the ocean, v'hayam einenu malei, and the ocean never becomes completely filled. There's always an opportunity to replenish it. El makom shahanechalim holchim sham ein shavim laleches, to the place where the rivers flow, so too they also return in their pattern, or in the place where they go. And he also points out that this is also an allusion to the replenishing of the oceans through what? How do oceans replenish themselves? Not just through flowing rivers, but also through rainfall. All bodies of water are constantly being replenished through waters that come from the sky. And where do the clouds come from? As we all know, even the RAMBAN knows this in the medieval time, clouds come from the production of mist and vapor from the evaporation of the ocean. The water vapor goes up into the sky, and then eventually it condenses, the clouds condense and they rain back in. So again, it's the cycle of life. Everything is constantly changing, but everything is constantly going back to its original state. Next, Shlomo describes the temporality of the world with the following analogy. We take a look in Pasuk Ches. Kol hadivarim yigeim. Everything is tired. Is that how they translate it? All words are wearying. Everything is tiring. Lo yuchal ish ledaber. Person can't even speak. Lo sisba ayin liros. The eye cannot be sated from its vision. V'lo simale ozen mishamoa. And nor can an ear be filled with listening. And so the Ramban explains that what this pasuk means is that all of the components of this world are like a working person who gets tired in the middle of an important project, and because he gets tired he can't complete the task, and so he quits in the middle and everything goes back to its original state. So just imagine a person rolling a big rock up a hill, and he gets tired and he can't finish, so he just walks away and the roll walks back down. So that's the analogy. It's kol hadivarim yigeim. Everything is like a weary man who quits in the middle of the day. You think things are changing and the world's going to have this huge metamorphosis and everything's going to change. Then all of a sudden the roll rolls right back down to where it started and everything goes back to where it was before. And furthermore, he says a man can't even speak, because when you try to describe what's going on in the world and all the changes that are taking place in the world, Shlomo says it's a vain effort, because sometimes by the time you finished talking about this new fad or this new news item, before you know it, it's yesterday's news and everything has gone back to where it was before. So sometimes you'll be having a conversation at the table about a new war, about a new cure, about a new something that's happening in the world, and before you can even finish the conversation, it's already turned out to be that nothing new has taken place at all, and the discussion and the news is over. Similarly, you can never have a lasting visual or audio experience, because by the time you get used to seeing or hearing something new, the image or sound is lost and everything has gone back to its original state. So that's the whole idea that he's trying to convey in this pasuk. I have more to say. We can keep going. I just want to know if there are any questions at this point, because we're almost out of time. Any questions or comments? Yes?
I'm a little stuck still at the point where this is supposed to be joyous. Like, is that going to reveal itself as we go along, that joy? Because I can't imagine it.
Well, I think what the Ramban is trying to tell you is that when you acquire wisdom about what's really important in life, that's when you can start enjoying life. You have to know what the priorities are. You have to know what's really important and what's not important. And once you know what's really important and what's not important, you won't spend time on the wrong things, and then you'll acquire happiness. But remember, the reason why the Ramban is saying this is because he wants to emphasize to us that despite the fact that this is a sad time, even Shlomo HaMelech, while he's writing Koheles, can still be happy because he knows that there's a greater purpose, and he's come to a realization of that greater purpose. So as I depart from you, Chevra, right, know that we should all be happy, because I'm going to a far better place, and that we're beginning a new chapter in the existence of Klal Yisrael. Okay. One last thing I'll mention. We'll just do the next two psukim, pasuk tes and pasuk yud. Shlomo describes how even though the constituent components of this world fade away, the rules of nature are still permanent. So he says in pasuk tes, "Ma shehayahu sheyiyeh," what was will be in the future. "U'ma shena'asahu sheyaseh," what has already been done will be done in the future. Ve'ein kol chadash tachas hashamesh, and there's nothing new under the sun. And then he continues and he says, and wait a minute, lest you think that I don't know what I'm talking about. In pasuk yud he says, "Yesh davar sheyomar re'ezeh chadashu." You might look at something in your world, in your existence, and you may say, "Hey, this is really something new." But he says, "Kvar haya la'olamim asher haya milafanim." In reality, it already existed well before us. Any new phenomenon, any new discovery, it's just a repetition of things or an accumulation of things that came before us. The only thing is that it hasn't surfaced in many generations, and therefore people forgot about it. People think that they've developed a new form of eating. People think they've developed a new form of thinking, a new philosophy, a new way of life. He says nothing is new. Everything that is now today is really just a recapitulation, a reformulation of things that were in the past. And just like the old phenomena disappeared and were forgotten, so will the things of today go the same way. And therefore he says, "Ein zichron larishonim, v'gam la'achronim sheyiyu, lo yihye lahem zikaronim sheyu la'achrona." He says, just like people forgot about what happened 50 or 100 or 200 or 300 years ago, then don't think that what you've developed now in today's world is going to be everlasting. Don't invest so much importance in the new things of today. Because just like yesterday's news is forgotten, today's news will eventually become yesterday's news, and that will be forgotten as well. Okay, I think we'll hold it here for tonight. I want you to have a chance to go to your next class. Any other questions or comments? Yes?
Are you suggesting that he's saying live for the future?
No, he's not saying to live for the future. He's saying live for today, but invest in those things that have permanence. Don't invest in those things that are only fleeting and temporary. Yeah. Yes, Stan?
Any new invention, though, was it just a different form in the past? They didn't have a cell phone 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, I was thinking about this whole idea of new technology. So I don't think that Shlomo HaMelech is talking about scientific discovery, right? I think because man is basically able to have a cumulative influence on the world around him, and he can actually harness knowledge from the past and use it cumulatively to be able to put together a computer or a cell phone or satellites and things like that. But Shlomo HaMelech is saying, don't think that this is not based on the past. And don't think that these things are going to have any sense of permanence. To the extent that they're just machinery, they will all, we can appreciate today how, more than ever, how disposable everything is and how quickly life moves forward. Today's technology will become yesterday's trash heap, the fodder for the garbage heap. Just think to yourselves, when you got your first IBM 486,
286.
well, you started with the 286. I don't know if people are old enough to remember those. Just remember when you got your first 486 IBM PC. You thought that was the cat's pajamas, right? You thought that was going to be the end all, and that it can't get any better than that. Lotus 1, 2, 3. My goodness, this is it. We've arrived. Right? And now look where we are today. Okay, have a good night, everyone.